When the matte black Lincoln Navigator pulled up to a crumbling duplex in the Chicago suburbs, the neighborhood froze. Billionaire CEO Victoria Sterling didn't do house calls. She fired executives for breathing too loudly. Yet, here she was, standing on a broken porch demanding to see the employee who had just ruined her morning. Liam Harding's life was held together by black coffee, neon sticky notes, and the desperate daily prayer that his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, wouldn't wake up coughing. 2 years ago, Liam had been a rising star in Chicago's architectural scene. Then a drunk driver ran a red light, taking his wife Rachel and leaving Liam to navigate the crushing realities of single parenthood alone. Since then, his ambition had been entirely replaced by survival. He traded his position at a prestigious travel-heavy boutique firm for a grueling but supposedly stable desk job as a senior project manager at Sterling Enterprises. Sterling Enterprises was a corporate titan, a commercial real estate empire with assets stretching from Manhattan to Tokyo. And at the absolute top of that empire sat Victoria Sterling. Victoria wasn't just a CEO, she was a force of nature. At 34, she had ruthlessly taken the reins of the company from her aging father, immediately gutting the bloated executive board and restructuring the firm with terrifying precision. Wall Street called her a visionary. Her employees called her the Ice Queen of LaSalle Street. She was known to fire department heads mid-sentence if they couldn't immediately produce the data she demanded. There were no excuses at Sterling Enterprises. You either delivered or you were gone. For Liam, staying off Victoria Sterling's radar was the ultimate goal. He just needed the paycheck and the premium health insurance. Chloe suffered from severe chronic asthma, and her medications and specialist visits were financially crippling. But staying invisible was becoming impossible, entirely thanks to Liam's immediate supervisor, David Campbell. David was a textbook corporate parasite, a man with a silver tongue, an expensive golf habit, and absolutely no technical skills. David had made a career out of stealing his subordinates' work. For the past 6 months, Sterling Enterprises had been fiercely competing for the Harbor Point Initiative, a $2 billion waterfront redevelopment project that would redefine the Chicago skyline. Liam had designed every square inch of the Harbor Point proposal. He had spent his nights calculating load-bearing stress tests, navigating archaic zoning variances, and designing a revolutionary eco-friendly drainage system that would save the city millions. He worked until his eyes bled, operating on 2 hours of sleep, fueled only by the fear of losing his job. David, meanwhile, had spent those 6 months playing squash and schmoozing with city councilmen, fully intending to present Liam's blueprints as his own masterstroke at the final executive review. The executive review was scheduled for Tuesday at 8 a.m. sharp. Victoria Sterling herself was flying in from London specifically to approve the final design. Monday night, Liam didn't sleep. He sat at his cramped kitchen table in his small suburban duplex, the glow of his laptop illuminating the dark circles under his eyes. He was putting the final touches on the 3D rendering of the waterfront pavilion. Across the room, the soft, rhythmic hum of Chloe's humidifier was the only sound in the apartment. By 5:30 a.m., it was finished. The project was flawless. All Liam had to do was put the digital files onto a secure drive, pack up the physical blueprints, and get to the office by 7:30 a.m. to set up the presentation room for David. He closed his laptop, rubbing his temples, feeling a brief, rare wave of pride. Just get through today, he told himself. Get through today, and maybe I can ask HR for a few days off. Then the coughing started. It wasn't the usual dry, raspy cough. It was a wet, violent hacking that immediately set off alarm bells in Liam's head. He sprinted into Chloe's bedroom. Chloe was sitting up in bed, her tiny hands clutching her chest. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with a terrifying shade of blue. She was wheezing, struggling to pull air into her tight lungs. "Daddy," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "It hurts." Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Liam's veins. "I've got you, baby. Daddy's right here." Nah. He scrambled for her emergency albuterol inhaler, pressing it to her lips, but she was struggling too much to inhale deeply. Her chest heaved, pulling inward at the ribs, a sign of severe respiratory distress. The inhaler wasn't working. The nebulizer machine would take too long to set up, and her breathing was deteriorating by the second. Liam glanced at the clock. 6:15 a.m. He grabbed Chloe, wrapping her in her favorite fleece blanket, grabbed his car keys, and ran out the door. The blueprints and the secure flash drive were left sitting on the kitchen table. The drive to Chicago Memorial Hospital was a blur of running red lights and pleading with his daughter to keep her eyes open when he burst through the sliding doors of the emergency room screaming for help. The triage nurses took one look at Chloe's oxygen saturation levels and immediately rushed her into the back. For the next 3 hours, Liam sat in a hard plastic chair in the pediatric ER, his head in his hands, completely numb to the world around him. He listened to the hum of the heart monitors, praying to a God he hadn't spoken to since his wife died. At 8:45 a.m., Dr. Evans finally emerged from the curtained room, offering a reassuring smile. "We've stabilized her, Liam. It was a severe exacerbation, triggered by a sudden drop in overnight temperatures. We've got her on a continuous nebulizer and intravenous steroids. She's exhausted, but she's going to be just fine." "Nat. Och. Out. So red. Oh. It." Liam collapsed back into the chair, letting out a sob of pure relief. Thank you, doctor." It was only when he sat by Chloe's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall steadily in a deep sleep, that the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by sinking dread. He patted his pockets. His phone. He pulled it out. The battery was dead. It had died sometime during the frantic drive to the hospital. Liam looked at the clock on the hospital wall. 10:15 a.m. The executive review had started over 2 hours ago. Victoria Sterling had been sitting in the boardroom, expecting a multi-billion-dollar presentation, and Liam, the only person who had the files, the physical blueprints, and the actual knowledge of the project, was missing in action. He was dead. His career wasn't just over. It was incinerated. David Campbell had warned him that one more slip-up would mean termination. Liam had been late 3 times this month due to babysitter cancellations and Chloe's minor sick days. Today was the final nail in the coffin. By 11:30 a.m., Dr. Evans signed the discharge papers. Chloe was weak, holding tightly to her father's neck as he carried her out to his rusted Honda Civic. The drive back to their duplex was silent. The gray Chicago sky seemed to match the heavy, suffocating weight in Liam's chest. He had no savings. His credit cards were maxed out from medical bills. If he lost this job, they would be evicted by the end of the month. He had sacrificed every ounce of his time and sanity for Sterling Enterprises, and he was about to be thrown out like garbage. When he finally got inside his apartment, he laid Chloe gently on the sofa, turning on her favorite cartoon to keep her distracted. He walked into the kitchen, his eyes falling on the pristine roll of blueprints and the silver flash drive sitting mockingly next to his cold coffee mug. He found his phone charger and plugged the dead device into the wall. As soon as the Apple logo appeared and the screen lit up, the phone began vibrating violently. 14 missed calls, 22 unread text messages. Almost all of them were from David Campbell. Liam opened the messages, his stomach churning. 7:45 a.m. Where the hell are you, Harding? You're down here now. 8:05 a.m. Victoria is in the boardroom. If you are not here in 2 minutes, you are fired. 8:20 a.m. You are dead to me. I'm going in with the preliminary mock-ups. 9:30 a.m. Don't bother coming in. Security is boxing up your desk. I will make sure you never work in this city again. Liam let the phone drop onto the table. It was over. He stared at his trembling hands, wondering how he was going to explain to his daughter that they might have to move into a shelter. He walked into the small kitchen. mindlessly opening a can of chicken noodle soup to heat up for Chloe. He stood over the stove, watching the pale broth bubble, entirely lost in his own despair. Then he heard it. The sound of heavy tires crunching on the gravel of his driveway, followed by the slamming of heavy car doors. Liam froze. He looked through the dusty blinds of his kitchen window. Parked behind his rusted Honda was a massive, pristine, matte black Lincoln Navigator. Two men in sharp black suits stepped out of the front doors, scanning the quiet suburban street with the intensity of Secret Service agents. Then the back door opened. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a tailored charcoal gray Dior suit, a silk blouse, and Louboutin heels that looked completely alien against the cracked concrete of Liam's walkway. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, flawless chignon. Her expression was completely unreadable, her eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses. It was Victoria Sterling. Liam stopped breathing. Why was the billionaire CEO of a global real estate empire walking up to his heavily mortgaged peeling duplex? CEOs didn't deliver termination papers personally. They certainly didn't drive an hour into the suburbs to do it. Knock, 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 knock. The rapping on the front door was sharp, authoritative, and impatient. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. He quickly wiped his hands on his jeans, walked past the living room where Chloe was staring wide-eyed at the door, and turned the deadbolt. He opened the door. Victoria Sterling stood on his porch. Up close, her presence was almost suffocating. She radiated power and impatience. She slowly lowered her sunglasses, her piercing ice-blue eyes sweeping over Liam's disheveled appearance, his stained t-shirt, his bloodshot eyes, his unkempt hair. Liam Harding. Her voice was crisp, perfectly modulated, and completely devoid of warmth. "Yes," Liam stammered, his throat completely dry. "Ms. Sterling, I can explain about this morning. There was an emergency." Victoria didn't wait for him to finish. She stepped forward, effectively forcing Liam to step back, and walk directly into his house. The two security guards remained planted on the porch, closing the front door behind her. She stood in the center of his cramped, messy living room. She took in the sight of the cheap, worn furniture, the pile of past-due bills on the side table, and finally her eyes landed on little Chloe, who was clutching a stuffed rabbit on the sofa, still wearing her hospital wristband. Victoria's gaze lingered on the little girl for a fraction of a second before her eyes snapped back to Liam. "At 8:15 this morning," Victoria began, her voice cutting through the silence of the room like a scalpel, "David Campbell walked into my boardroom to present the Harbor Point Initiative. He brought a digital slideshow containing preliminary sketches and absolutely zero structure of data. She began to slowly pace the small room, her heels clicking aggressively against the cheap laminate flooring. When I asked him to explain the tensile strength of the waterfront pavilion's overarching canopy, he stuttered. When I asked him about the revised zoning variances for the eco-drainage system, he told me the legal department was still looking into it." Victoria stopped pacing and fixed her terrifying gaze on Liam. "David Campbell stood in my boardroom and tried to sell me a $2 billion dream using buzzwords and empty air." Liam swallowed hard. "Miss Sterling, the files. I have the final. I am speaking, Mr. Harding," she snapped, though her voice barely raised in volume. She stepped closer to him. "I do not tolerate incompetence. And I certainly do not tolerate liars. Before I fired David Campbell 30 minutes ago, I had my IT department pull the metadata on every single file he submitted." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. "Fired? She fired David?" "Imagine my surprise," Victoria continued, her tone dangerously quiet, "when I discovered that the architect listed in the metadata, the author of the revolutionary eco-drainage system, and the digital signature on every single complex load-bearing algorithm did not belong to the director of project management." She walked over to the kitchen table. She looked down at the roll of physical blueprints and the silver flash drive. She reached out with a manicured hand, tracing the edge of the paper. It belonged to a mid-level project manager who has been late to work 3 times this month, she said, looking back up at him. A man who entirely ghosted the most important presentation of his career this morning? Victoria Sterling picked up the roll of blueprints and unrolled them across the kitchen table, weighing the corners down with Liam's cold coffee mug and a bottle of Chloe's medicine. She leaned over, studying the intricate hand-drawn details that Liam had spent hundreds of hours perfecting. For a long minute, the only sound in the room was the cartoon playing on the television. "This is brilliant," Victoria murmured, almost to herself. It was the first time her voice lacked its icy edge. She stood up straight, turning to face Liam. "You designed this. All of it. David Campbell didn't contribute a single line of ink to this project, did he?" "No, ma'am," Liam said softly, the exhaustion finally catching up to him. "He didn't." "Then why?" Victoria stepped toward him, her blue eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and genuine confusion. "Did you hand a multi-billion-dollar design over to a parasite? And more importantly, why the hell weren't you there this morning to defend your own genius?" Liam looked at this billionaire CEO, a woman who possessed more wealth and power than he could comprehend, standing in his run-down kitchen. He had nothing left to lose. He was too tired to be afraid anymore. "Because, Miss Sterling," Liam pointed a shaking finger toward the living room, "my daughter couldn't breathe. Knocked her. And Victoria's gaze shifted from Liam's exhausted face to the small girl on the sofa. Chloe was half asleep, the bright colors of the television reflecting in her tired eyes, her chest rising and falling with a slight, lingering wheeze. The harsh lines around Victoria's mouth usually set in a permanent scowl of corporate disapproval, softened by a microscopic fraction. But her eyes remained sharp, calculating the variables of the situation with the same terrifying speed she used to dismantle hostile takeovers. "Dr. Evans at Chicago Memorial?" Victoria asked, her voice startlingly calm, entirely devoid of the venom she had used seconds prior. Liam blinked, thrown off by the sudden shift in her demeanor. Yes. How did you—" "Not full by. Fall sober. I read the hospital discharge paperwork sitting next to your coffee mug," she said seamlessly, pulling a sleek encrypted satellite phone from her tailored blazer. She tapped a single button and brought it to her ear. "Get me Dr. Harrison at Rush University Medical Center." Now, Liam took a step forward, his protective instincts flaring. "Miss Sterling, what are you doing?" "My daughter just got out of the hospital. She needs to rest." Victoria held up a single manicured finger, silencing him instantly. She spoke rapidly into the phone. "Harrison, it's Victoria. I need a pediatric respiratory specialist at my executive suite at Sterling Tower in exactly 40 minutes. Set up a continuous albuterol nebulizer station, pediatric monitoring equipment, and whatever high-grade steroids are standard for a post-acute severe asthma exacerbation. Send a bill to my personal account. Do not fail me." She hung up, dropping the phone back into her pocket, and turned her piercing blue eyes back to Liam. "You have exactly 5 minutes to pack a bag for your daughter," Victoria commanded, her tone leaving zero room for debate. "Grab the blueprints. Grab the flash drive. My security team will carry her to the navigator. We are leaving." "Leaving?" Liam's head was spinning. "Ms. Sterling, I can't just drag my sick kid to a corporate office. I'm fired, I understand, but I am not putting her health at risk for—" "You are not fired, Liam, and you are not listening to me," Victoria interrupted, taking a step closer, the sheer gravity of her presence pinning him in place. "Your daughter is not going to a corporate office. She is going to my private penthouse suite on the top floor of Sterling Tower, where the chief of pediatrics from Rush University Medical Center will monitor her while she watches cartoons on a 100-inch screen. And while she is being cared for by the best medical professionals in this state, you are going to put on a clean shirt from my executive closet, and you are going to save my $2 billion project." Liam stared at her, utterly bewildered. "The executive review is over." "I missed it." "The executive review was a formality," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, conspiratorial murmur. "The actual pitch, the final presentation to the mayor of Chicago and the city zoning board, is at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and we have a massive problem." Victoria walked back to the kitchen table, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the hand-drawn schematics. "David Campbell wasn't just a lazy parasite who stole your work to stroke his own ego," she revealed, her eyes darkening with a genuine, terrifying rage. "When my security team escorted him out of the building this morning, they confiscated his company devices. My cybersecurity chief cracked his phone in 10 minutes. Campbell had been sending encrypted emails to Thomas Keller at SOM Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, our biggest rival for the Harbor Point initiative." Liam felt the blood drain from his face. Corporate espionage. Campbell knew he couldn't actually present the technical data today because he didn't understand it, Victoria continued. "His plan was to intentionally tank our executive review, tell me the project was mathematically unviable, and then secretly sell your revolutionary eco-drainage schematics to Keller. Sam was planning to use your exact designs to crush our bid at the city council meeting this afternoon. Campbell was going to walk into a vice president role at their firm by Monday." Liam leaned against the kitchen counter, the weight of the betrayal washing over him. He had sacrificed time with his daughter to make Campbell look good, and the man was actively trying to destroy the company. "Sam has the mayor's ear," Victoria said, her voice tightening. "Keller is going to walk into that boardroom at 4 o'clock and present a bastardized version of your work. The only way we win this bid, the only way we expose them and secure the waterfront, is if the true architect of the Harbor Point initiative walks into that room and proves mathematically and structurally that the design belongs to Sterling Enterprises." She looked at him, not as a boss looking at an employee, but as a general looking at her most vital soldier. "I don't care about your attendance record, Liam. I don't care about your HR file. I care about competence. You built this city's future on my dime, and I will be damned if I let an arrogant thief hand it to my rivals. Now pack a bag. We have a war to win." The ride to downtown Chicago in the back of the matte black Navigator was a surreal blur. Chloe, entirely unfazed by the billionaire CEO sitting across from them, had fallen asleep leaning against the soft leather upholstery, wrapped securely in her fleece blanket. When they arrived at the underground private garage of Sterling Tower, everything moved with military precision. Dr. Harrison, a silver-haired, kindly man, was waiting at the private elevator. By the time they reached the 75th floor, Chloe was whisked into a massive, sunlit penthouse suite overlooking Lake Michigan, immediately hooked up to state-of-the-art monitors by 2 private nurses. "She is in excellent hands, Liam." "Liam, doctor," Harrison assured him, checking Chloe's vitals. "Her oxygen saturation is already climbing. Go do your job. We've got her." Liam kissed his daughter's forehead, a massive, crushing weight finally lifting off his shoulders. When he stepped out of the suite, Victoria was waiting in the hallway. She handed him a garment bag. "Armani." "It should fit," she said briskly. "The boardroom is on the 60th floor. You have 20 minutes to review your slides. I will not tolerate a stutter. Now, At exactly 4 p.m., the double mahogany doors of the primary executive boardroom swung open. The room was packed. The mayor of Chicago sat at the center of the massive glass table, flanked by city planners, zoning commissioners, and environmental regulators. At the far end of the table sat Thomas Keller, the smarmy, overconfident lead architect from SOM. And sitting right next to Keller, wearing a smug, victorious grin, was David Campbell. Liam walked into the room wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, carrying the physical roll of blueprints. Victoria Sterling followed right behind him, radiating an aura of absolute unyielding dominance. The room fell dead silent. David Campbell's smug grin instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. "Miss Smart's asking the first, Sterling," the mayor said, clearing his throat. "We were just about to conclude. Mr. Keller and Mr. Campbell here have presented a fascinating waterfront proposal for SOM, an eco-friendly drainage system that is frankly revolutionary." Victoria took her seat at the head of the table, steepling her fingers. She didn't even look at Campbell. "Is that so, Mr. Mayor?" "How incredibly fortuitous, because my senior project manager, Liam Harding, is here to present the exact same system." Thomas Keller scoffed, standing up. "Victoria, this is desperate even for you. Your firm missed the morning deadline. We've already submitted the technical data." "Really?" Liam spoke up. His voice was steady, backed by months of grueling, obsessive work. He walked to the front of the room, plugging his silver flash drive into the main console. The 3D rendering of the Harbor Point Pavilion illuminated the massive screens. "Mr. Keller, could you explain the hydrostatic pressure calculations you used for the subterranean retaining walls? Because looking at the printouts you gave the mayor, you failed to account for the soil liquefaction indices near Navy Pier." Keller froze. The engineering team is still finalizing." "No, they aren't," Liam interrupted, pulling up a complex web of algorithms on the screen. "Because if you build this pavilion using the parameters Campbell sold you, the entire eastern cantilever will collapse into Lake Michigan within 3 years under the stress of winter ice loads." Liam didn't stop there. For the next 45 minutes, he delivered a masterclass in architectural engineering. He dismantled SOM's stolen presentation piece by piece, exposing the fact that Campbell had only stolen the conceptual drafts, completely missing the vital structural math that made the design actually work. Liam moved through zoning ordinances, LEED Platinum certification requirements, and load-bearing stress tests with the fluidity of a maestro conducting a symphony. He didn't just present a building, he presented a living, breathing vision of Chicago's future. By the time Liam rolled up his blueprints, the city planners were visibly stunned. The mayor was nodding furiously, completely sold. Thomas Keller was red-faced, packing up his briefcase. David Campbell looked like he was going to be physically sick. "Mr. Mayor," Victoria said softly, her voice carrying across the quiet room, "Sterling Enterprises doesn't just hire people to draw pretty pictures. We hire architects who understand the bedrock of this city. Furthermore, my legal team has already filed a massive corporate espionage lawsuit against SOM and Mr. Cobber. Campbell, I suggest you heavily reconsider who the city of Chicago does business with." The mayor stood up, offering his hand to Liam. "Mr. Harding, that was the most brilliant structural defense I have ever witnessed. You have a deal. Harbor Point belongs to Sterling." "Look, Matt, but, As the room cleared out, with Campbell and Keller practically sprinting for the elevators to call their respective lawyers, Liam stood by the glass windows, looking out over the city he was about to rebuild. The adrenaline was finally fading, leaving behind a profound sense of accomplishment. Victoria walked up beside him, handing him a glass of Macallan 18. "I told you I don't tolerate incompetence, Liam," she said, clinking her glass against his. "And I meant it, but I also reward absolute brilliance." Liam took a sip of the scotch, the burn grounding him in reality. "Thank you, Miss Sterling. For today, for Chloe, I didn't know how to repay you for the medical care." "You already have," Victoria replied coolly, looking out at the skyline. "Effective immediately, you are the new director of project management. Your salary is being tripled. You will have a corner office on the 70th floor, an executive assistant, and a company car." She turned to him, the faint ghost of a smile finally appearing on her lips. "And Liam, Sterling Enterprises offers a platinum-tier executive health package. It covers 100% of all specialist visits, emergency care, and chronic illness medications for dependents. Chloe will never miss a treatment again. Do I make myself clear? Liam's eyes burned with sudden, overwhelming emotion. He looked at the ruthless billionaire CEO, the Ice Queen of LaSalle Street, and realized that sometimes the coldest exteriors protected the fiercest loyalties. Crystal clear, Victoria, Liam smiled. Good, she snapped, turning on her Louboutin heels and heading for the door. Take the rest of the week off to be with your daughter, Director Harding, because on Monday we'd break ground. From the brink of eviction to rebuilding the Chicago skyline, Liam's story proves that hard work in the dark always comes to light. If this incredible tale of a ruthless billionaire stepping up for a single dad inspired you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs motivation today, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life corporate drama stories.